It's now 2020. The Australian property bubble began to collapse in 2018. Mortgage distress, bank foreclosures, job losses, and homelessness, falling government tax revenues are all creating hardship not seen since the 1930s depression. In Aussie Street, things are much better, although they do include some challenging changes before all 4 lots are buzzing with a revived household and neighbourhood non-monetary economy. At number 2 and number 3, the systems put in place over the previous decade are really paying dividends. The kids are growing up with excitement and learning from parents and elders as they contribute to the household economy. Ian and Andrea are pleased to have invested the capital and time in supporting the next generation to create new livelihoods. Gareth is engaged in high-end industrial salvage and obtainium engineering projects that are helping urban agriculture, backyard manufacturing and repair businesses start up without bank finance. Demand for Ollie's micro-urban farm produce is booming, but he can't feed the growing households at home and supply all the demand for veggie boxes. For some years now, Ollie has been trying to get access to Fred and Hilda's backyard as an alternative to moving the market garden to a larger site. But Fred has been obsessed with mowing the dusty, bare ground. He's not doing it himself anymore, but getting it done. Megan, one of Ollie's box scheme customers, is a nurse who strikes up a good relationship with Hilda, who reminds Megan of her own grandmother still living in provincial China. After Fred has an accident that confines him to a wheelchair, Megan gives notice at her rental lease and moves in as an informal carer. This relationship softens Fred's resistance, allowing Ollie to take over the backyard with the expanded chook tractor system. The extra growing space and a good growing season quickly triples his production. Connecting the house roof to the tank at number 2 was an easy retrofit that increased the yield of water for irrigation. A second-hand polytunnel is the next addition at number 1 that increases early and late season produce. Hilda's depression is eased by visiting the chooks in the backyard, scratching through the strips of spent crops. Megan is occupied with Fred's declining state. Homemade marijuana biscuits are keeping his pain at bay, but he is ready to go. And Hilda finds it so painful seeing him unable to move. After persistent pleading from Fred, Megan uses her medical contacts to get the necessary opiates, and Fred passes with Hilda and Megan's assistance. The funeral is a large one for someone with no surviving relatives other than his wife. Megan uses Fred's workshop to make a basic coffin from second-hand ply, with some silky oak boards left over from the logging at number 3 to add colour. Working in Fred's perfect workshop for the first time stimulates Megan to start making bee boxes. And soon there are sweet-smelling hives in the front yard that don't seem to invite thieves the way unattended chooks do these days. At 4A, Nicole has been there for 2 years when a bank foreclosure sale sign goes up out the front. After getting nowhere with the real estate agent, she exchanges notes with Rebecca at 4B, who is now a branch manager and is personally obsessed with the property market. It turns out that the new owner got the place for 60% of what Rebecca thought it would be worth. Rebecca wonders whether her own bank is covering up big losses. She and Nigel have resisted buying their own place ever since the GFC, because she thought property prices were going to crash. But until recently, it felt like they'd missed the boat of home ownership, and in any case, had spent a lot of their savings on overseas travel. Within a year, another forced sale sign goes up, and around the same time, Nicole loses her job. She can't afford to pay for the electricity and gas, and eventually the services are disconnected. Without a job and cold in the dark, she reluctantly moves in to her boyfriend's apartment. Reluctant because his housekeeping standards don't match hers. 4A is now empty, and before long, it gets vandalised. Nigel's insurance sales job is heading for the rocks, and Rebecca is talking about bypassing the real estate agent to make an offer to the current owner on the whole place. The day she contacts the owner to talk turkey, there's a fire. And by the time the fire brigade arrives, 4A is gutted. The Photinia hedge out the front showed its fire retardant character by not burning. But somehow the sick gum tree on the street caught on fire, and one of the gung-ho firefighters decided it needed to be cut down. The fire brings people together on the street, but during the chaos of the night, Rebecca's dogs escape and somehow kill several of Ollie's chooks, which are now worth a fortune. Ollie has to be restrained, but he's adamant that the dogs have to go because they'll do it again. For Rebecca, the dogs are her children, and after Ollie threatens to poison them, Rebecca and Nigel decide Aussie St is not the place for them, even though it feels they were so close to owning what has been their home for decades. They decide to buy elsewhere and leave with their beloved dogs. The council contractor demolishes the shell of 4A, and before long, the blackberries and weeds that had taken over the garden have colonised the rubble field. After a few months, the neighbours notice lights on in 4B. Rather feral-looking squatters on bicycles have moved in. The newcomers seem fairly quiet, and an Aboriginal flag covers the main window. Within weeks of the squatters moving in, another forced sale sign goes up. After years of pestering by Andrea and Gareth, Ian has finally got his money out of uni super, but they're now worried that it's too dangerous to stash any more cash. And the government is planning to phase out cash, I don't know, terrorism funding or something. With Rebecca's parting words, "Take your money out of the bank," ringing in their ears, Ian and Andrea buy number 4B and the rubble field for 25% of its peak value, complete with squatters. The squatters, Lisa, Kit, Lance and Seb, claim to be a bicycle repair collective, but with a hard anarchist outlook. They change from quiet to aggro about Andrea and Ian being up themselves if they think they own the place just because they exchanged worthless currency of a morally bankrupt capitalist state created for the benefit of the 1%. In any case, all property in this country was stolen from the Kooris. Lance tells them that he's a descendant of local Aboriginal clans. They are also full of disdain for Ian's plug-in electric car as a sign of the eco-bourgeoisie. Andrea and Ian find the squatters' attitude a huge challenge to their self-image of being on the side of the downtrodden and the dispossessed. But when the squatters discover that Gareth is an ace metal worker and has a MIG welder, their attitude softens. Of more immediate interest is Ollie's backyard farming operation, as competition for their usual food supply in the skips is getting intense, even ugly. Getting an ID card for rationed access to moles or bullies is out of the question, and the farmers' markets are just too expensive. Through their connection to the young folks on the street, Lisa and Seb eventually establish a relationship with Andrea and Ian, who are still feeling a bit burnt. Gareth negotiates an in-kind rent agreement, leading to some modest retrofits. A greenhouse on the north side made of glass bricks, a water tank and a sump pump from the stormwater detention tank, and the squatters agree to keep everyone's bicycles in Aussie Street maintained and repaired and confine their stuff to the house and garage. Because Alicia and Ollie's daughter, Rihanna, is mad keen to get goats on the vacant front lot. An electric fence is whipped up, and Alicia's long-time raw goat's milk supplier at the local farmers market provides a pregnant doe for Rihanna's 14th birthday present. A bleating kid is soon the star of Aussie Street. But for security at night, the animals are locked in the new milking stall built over the top of Ollie's old compost bays. Goat fodder is harvested around the neighbourhood. Planting an almond and olive out the front symbolises the squatters becoming fully fledged members of the Aussie Street neighbourhood. The big change next door is when Gareth's pregnant girlfriend, Nisha, moves in after she lost her job as a vet. They are planning a home birth, which would make their child a second-generation home birth baby, with Gareth born at home in the 80s. At number 1, Hilda sells the property to Megan for a nominal sum, but there's still a large land transfer tax to formalise the process. 6 months after Fred, Hilda is ready to die too. She manages without assistance by simply not eating. The funeral is even bigger than Fred's. Lucy, her teenage neighbour with the chalks, has kept in contact with Hilda over the years since her move to the country. Now in her late 60s, she is a prominent writer on ecofeminism and shocks everyone by revealing that she thinks Hilda was a lesbian who never came out. Young folks are enthralled by Lucy's stories of growing up in Aussie Street in the 60s. It amazes them that so much of what they are working to establish now existed in the 50s and 60s as a remnant of traditional self-reliance, but without the effort and excitement those behaviours now require and generate. Megan's recovery process really gets going when she employs young Jake from number 3 to help gut and renovate some of the rooms of the house. While his mum Jodie and Gareth were never partners, Gareth was a father figure to Jake and taught him about obtainium engineering and owner building. Replacing the decaying porch with an Aussie Street attached greenhouse, a new front veranda, installation of a composting toilet, and a grey water system modelled on the one at number 3 are the key upgrades. Megan sets the place up as an eco-travellers share house. With the travellers' help, Megan and Ollie increase production at a great pergola along the drive to Fred's workshop, which has been retained as a working museum of 1950s self-reliance. Between the focus on wood at number 1, the bicycle repair workshop at number 4, and Gareth's metal and electronics workshop at number 3, most stuff can be maintained or fixed in the street. Ollie contributes the last of his tree stock to a community planting at the local creek reserve, well protected from local goats, and sets up wicking beds down the driveway to increase veggie production more. The old carport, which has been the nursery for 20 years, is enclosed in a light earth building workshop to create a rodent and thief-proof cool store powered by an autonomous system set up by Gareth and Jake. The more challenging change at number 2, especially for Ollie, is that Rihanna's boyfriend, Kai, has moved in. He's a poet and a muso. Ollie thinks Kai's a bit of a dreamer. Rihanna reminds her father of the time he took her to a talk by Nicole Foss, in which she suggested that people who could entertain might make a modest living in frugal futures. Kai's songs and guitar playing always entertains the residents of Aussie Street as they settle into doing less but enjoying life more.